Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to make a serious argument for what I still believe today is the best overall spot to retire across the whole Sunshine State in 2025. Think of the final homestead. I have about 6-ish different bullet points that I think have materially changed even over the last 12 months. We have things like the southern master plan developments and what that has expanded someone's reach to a town means. Central proximity. You know, what is north and south, looking up and looking below you? As far as development goes in the surrounding towns, we have, in a macro sense, how big is big enough for a town and why does that matter at all, and much, much more. So I hope you enjoy my take. If you do, and we've not met, my name is Adam Hancock. If I can assist you in any way in the Southwest Florida real estate market, Tampa Bay, Sarasota Greater, Naples, Fort Myers Greater, please consider reaching out. Also have some fun giveaways in the description box below. And without further ado, let's hop in. Okay, number one on my list, I want to start off with the growth of an area called Welland Park. You know, the thing when you look at a retirement conversation with a town like Sarasota, there's a reason that it's on these lists every single year. You know, you have the density of culture and art. World-class beaches are low-hanging fruit. You know, if you want to choose the Gulf Coast and you've kind of canceled out the Atlantic, especially the Panhandle, you can see how people get narrowed down pretty quickly. Well, when you've looked at this up until very, very recently, I think it feels like you have a lot of options. It used to feel like that. You know, Lakewood Ranch has been kicking around. Even before Waterside, it was meaningful. It started building in 95, so 2010 plus, you had a lot of neighborhoods there. But you go and look at Lakewood Ranch 3-4 years ago, and then you say, what else is there? Of course, you're gonna have people that, you know, try to jam into the Barrier Islands, the quintessential Florida living with Siesta Key and Longboat Key and all of that. You're gonna have more affordable versions of that with like the Manatee River, Western Bradenton. You could go south and you kind of get the idea, but everything else besides Lakewood Ranch, for the most part, the way it feels, especially on like a 3-4 day trip, was a resale driven market. You had central Sarasota, you had, you know, like Pinecraft or like the Mennonite heaviness randomly in the middle of town. You had Palmer Ranch, which was the end phase of the previous kind of sexy suburb. You went south and you got maybe more affordable versions by going to Osprey, Nokomis, Venice, and like Englewood was a little quieter and that kind of thing. But you could see how if you were trying to relocate from out of state, a lot of options would go to very few very fast. What's happened over the last 12 to 24 months has been the master plan part of South Venice, called Welland Park, has absolutely exploded, where now it's not just slightly interesting, it's its own individual standalone thing in a silo, I think. Because if you looked at Lakewood Ranch versus Welland Park in the past, it's not like it didn't exist. You know, you had an area called the West Villages, which is now the West Villages district of Welland Park, but it was just the West Villages. You had Grand Palm and Oasis and Renaissance, and you had some communities there that were a small example. It looked like old school Venice just doing some new construction. When people went from one to the other, they were like, I don't know. I mean, it feels very far south. It feels like it's on its own. We can't have any idea of what's going to happen next. Well, since that period, which was kind of the history forever until now, you've gone from like 4 or 5 random neighborhoods to 14 plus. They built a new district called the Playmore, which has its own downtown. You have a lot of sister communities that are in Lakewood Ranch in Venice, and it looks like a district. It looks like an inclusive district. They put a spring training baseball facility there for the Braves called Cool Today Park. It's super golf cart friendly. And you come to shop in 2025 and you finally have what you would need to make it actually a competitive town, not a junior version of a town that's around it. You have new construction that competes with resale, that competes with really expensive stuff, more affordable stuff, waterfront stuff, beach stuff. You have everything that Sarasota has, basically, but then you also have access to that. So if you look with fresh eyes, now it's probably is Tampa even in the cards? If not, it's a Sarasota surrounding. Lakewood Ranch feels like a northeastern Sarasota suburb more than anything, and then parishes beyond it. Versus Venice, versus northern Naples, versus the Atlantic coast, for the most part for most people. Boca Raton, Delaware Beach, St. Augustine. And I would think, if anything, a lot of people have always kind of enjoyed where Sarasota's based, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. What Venice and Welland Park have been doing a lot lately is they've been yanking people from other areas that were chosen as a B option previously. They're taking a lot of people in the Estera, Bonita Springs, North Naples area, especially like the Villages up in the northern central Florida area, which is kind of a peacock of an area that offered a lot. I'm seeing a lot of people come down because of the similar demographic. It's not all 55 and up, but a lot of people are in that direction. People really like the golf cart friendliness of Sun City Center and the Villages, and they're kind of leaning in this way and just saying like, this is the town I'd rather be close to also have the suburb I'd rather be in. And I only feel like we've kind of unlocked a part of town that previously was kind of hidden under the radar as a sleeper in very recent history. All right, number 2, central proximity. This is one of my recurring favorites because simply, if you don't like the circle on a map of what you're targeting, then nothing else matters. The value that I'm trying to describe is only incremental to the location that you've already set as a foundation works for you. And I think in the state of Florida, the belle of the ball is Sarasota to me. You know, not only are you 2 hours one way to Orlando, you are basically 3.5 hours from everything central to the east, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. You can drip out to the Keys. You're 4.5 up to like St. Augustine, St. John's, Ponte Vedra, 5.5 to Savannah, Georgia. But then when you zoom in on a micro level, why not sit below, 60 miles below the best big city in the state to me, Tampa Bay, and above the sister version of Sarasota, which is Naples, Fort Myers? Because I'd much rather sit in the middle and look up at one and down at the other than choose to be in contrast to that, trying to live somewhere in between. And you have the Gulf Coast waters and, you know, basically everything but the panhandle. So you get to enjoy the best of what makes Florida special while committing to one, but not feeling like you're sacrificing the others. And then after all of that, you know, one of the beauties of, you know, living the golden years is the lovely beach town is lovely because it's not over commercialized. You don't have to deal with a lot of the minutia that you had to sit in New Jersey for 40 years before that, but you might want access to it, you know? So why not go 60, not have it right on top of you, but 60 miles, you have the Tampa Bay Lightning, you have the Bucks, you have the Rays, you have the Rowdy soccer team, all of the concerts, stand-up comedy and everything that they do in these kind of large venues. You have restaurants and malls that they're not going to put in certain towns, but they put in others. And then you look the other direction, and you have the lovely parts that you can pull out of Lee and Collier County. You have Cape Coral with more waterfront canals than Venice, Italy itself. You have Sanibel and Captiva, which are really unique, special places with like seashelling and nature-centric. You have Naples proper, you have Marco Island. But then you come home and you have Venice Beach and Brohard and Casperson and Siesta Key, Lido, Longboat. Downtown Sarasota is very much play first, work second. It's walkable, it's clean, it's upscale, it's not pretentious. And I think that has to be one of the absolute most meaningful points that you can make if you're choosing kind of this proverbial final destination spot when it comes to the state of Florida. All right, point number 3, let's talk size for a minute. So as I've alluded to a little bit throughout the video, there are definitely towns throughout the state of Florida that, there's not that many of them, but there's a few, that might be too much for what you want or need right now. But on the other side, I think there's a lot of places that might be a little too small too. You don't have to be coming from a Manhattan to a Sarasota, but if you're coming from any decently sized town and you go to like one of these very small loads of towns that go up and down the Atlantic coast, you might be like, it feels quaint, it feels nice. But for someone like me, I know that I would want a little bit more than that. You know, St. Augustine is a fantastic example. I really like St. Johns County. I think it's lovely. It's a little far up northeast, but I mean, you have Ponte Vedra there. The beaches are really nice. It's like, you know, I think it's the oldest continuously inhabited city in the state of Florida. So you have this crazy culture and all these kind of things that are quality aspects of living there. But you could make the argument, I think, that it might be a little small, and what makes it work for people is also that proximity to Jacksonville. It's the combination of the two that make the whole thing kind of make sense in people's mind. I think Sarasota, on the other hand, is just big enough where it's not dependent on Tampa Bay being an hour away, which creates an environment where now that is a bonus. So you get the best of a three-headed monster around you instead of needing them to even make the town work and satiate your needs. You know, like when it comes to airports, for instance, you have Tampa International an hour away, you have Orlando, you have RSW to the south, but you also have SRQ, which is like usually 25 to 45 minutes from anywhere in both counties combined. They're getting a lot of international flights. It's not a massive airport, but I mean, I've flown in there direct many, many times. It's becoming very accessible depending if you go southwest or wherever you're coming from. Now you can kind of use all three, but this one still would be viable for most people. Take culture. This is where Sarasota is a real anomaly. A lot of people are coming from areas where they not only want some coastal environment, but they do like the density of museums, art galleries, concert venues, and the like is higher per capita than anywhere in the state of Florida in such a small little town. And one that hasn't really been a big thing all the time I was growing up was like commercial amenities, like restaurants, shopping, that kind of thing. We had Sarasota Square Mall, which is kind of a dead mall in South Sarasota now. We had Southgate Mall, which is another one where you walk through and it's like random businesses in there now that aren't even like mall kind of businesses. But since the time that I was younger there, you have University Town Center with all the development the Bendersons are doing, which basically has these like luxury malls where like instead of a mall with a food court, it has this entire across the street outdoor restaurant districts that all make up this one particular area. When you get to the coast, you have downtown Sarasota, you have Siesta Key Village, you have St. Armand's Circle, which is like 100+ shop, restaurant, boutique area that's right on the water. The suburbs now have like everything but the beach. You know, Lakewood Ranch has not only downtown Lakewood Ranch like it used to, it has Waterside Place, which is like a proper downtown, all on the lakes, 25-foot wide sidewalks. The #1 farmers market in the state is in that district. You have Center Point, which is another up and coming one. Downtown Welland Park, I mentioned at the beginning. You know, Golf Gate was always there as kind of an indie looking downtown, but you could go on and on and on. So it's got enough where like you're not really running out to these surrounding towns just to get more than a grocery store like you did in the past. And as I finish this section, let me just grab my 4th point, which I was gonna break out separately, and talk beach variety. It's kind of a random one, but I don't think it's not nothing. It feels like there's like so many beaches here. If you can just get near one, it works, but that's not how people live. It's not, everybody's not attracted to the same place for the same reason. So Tampa Bay, for instance, it looks like there's a million beaches up and down Barrier Islands there, but Sarasota, on the other hand, are very separate. You know, it's like districts. So you have Siesta Key, the island. The beach is one part of it, but you have the island, which is like a distinct, like 7 to 8 mile long island that's adjacent to South Sarasota. 3 beaches on it: Siesta Key, Crescent, and Turtle. You have 2 shopping districts on it. But then Lido is a completely different little district. It's very, very small, that butts at the St. Armand's Circle. Before you know it, you hit Longboat Key, which is another like 7 mile long, very, very homestead-based residential feeling, has public beach accesses, but not in like a party way. Anna Maria Island to the north is its own separate world. You used to only be able to access it by water. And Venice is like going to a whole different part of town. Englewood is beyond that. You have Boca and Manasota Key, and they all kind of live different. So it lets people go there and experience those areas separately from each other. And it doesn't feel, I mean, if you're up north, you turn around, you're in Treasure Island, you turn around, you see St. Pete Beach, turn the other way, you have Madeira and Reddington. It feels like a blur. And that's something that you appreciate more when you get here, even if you don't live on one of those islands. So I think all of that colliding into one valuable point makes this place somewhere that you could spend the majority of your golden years without feeling a tug to other locations. All right, number 5 is kind of a niche one, and that is pre-construction condominiums. So say you just want to go full on Florida and you want to live in one of these like beautiful new buildings and have water access and a doorman, valet, it's turnkey as it gets. Well, one, it's not near as abundant as you would think. A lot of these towns in Florida don't allow this kind of development, for good or bad, you know, depending on what you're looking for. If they do, a lot of it's urban. So it's like stuff that you'd probably be used to in other cities. It's downtown Orlando, it's the urban parts of Tampa Bay, inland. It is Miami, Jacksonville. You're seeing similar stuff. I think Sarasota, Florida has one of the most unique takes on not only how many buildings are here, which feels like it shouldn't be necessarily, but how they're orienting them. But one option is the Barrier Islands. So this is where you see a lot of the legacy stuff. Like, so Longboat Keys up here. This is Lido. This is St. Armand's Circle, the shopping district. This is a little, pretty awesome looking neighborhood called Bird Key. Talk about location spot. This is Siesta Key, and then you start to creep down. Like, this is the main Siesta Key Beach, Crescent's in the middle, Turtles down, more residential down here. This ports you in to get to Northern Bridge. Downtown's right here. This is like where you'll see a lot of the 1980s stuff that people are dealing with, like reserves and assessments right now, where they're sense that Miami crisis. They're having like a turnover in a way that insurance and all these things are issues you got to look at. But also, there's a reason people are shoving into here, you know, like look how narrow these islands are. So your bay, your beach, maybe you're both, depending on where you're at. And if you want Gulf Coast frontage, doesn't exist unless you're on one of these islands. The most interesting thing to me, however, is not in that. It's over here. So you have almost like a condominium neighborhood. And these are the pre-construction luxury stuff by all of the same builders that are doing like the Miami developments and things like that, but in a way more boutique way. So you have a district right here called the Quay. So I don't know if you've ever stayed at the Hyatt Regency in Sarasota, but that's that little canal it looks at. And you basically go like this, and you have a 14-acre waterfront district that has soon to be like 3 to 4 Ritz-Carlton branded residence hotel condominiums. Some have hotel presence too, but some are just boutique condos, 73 units, 100 units. You have one called the Beso, which is Coulter Urban's division as well. It's like 149 units. You have one really, really nice one called One Park. It's like 124 units. There's a luxury apartment rental complex actually put out by the Lennar parent company. I think it's called Cordelia. You have an Ocean Prime Steakhouse that just went down there. Jack Dusty is another high-end restaurant that sits at the foot of these. You're gonna have like commercial level shopping like you see in downtown Naples in a real luxury fashion. There are like public but private parks. There's a canal out there that leads you right. I mean, you're leaving right out here. I mean, you can see the Ben Franklin Bridge from it, so you can see the beach from it. It's just unbelievable location, but it's in this like very narrow area. Another one is Golden Gate Point. So this is a peninsula you can see, and that has a 10-story limit to the height. So even the buildings where they're trying to do more units, they have to separate the building. It's all kind of surrounded by condominiums and then like one that juts up right in the middle of it. But it all feels quaint and way more quiet than you're going to see in these hustle bustle urban districts. Pretty incredible. On top of all of that, I don't know if it'll stay this way forever, but the entire county of Sarasota has an 18 floor limit technically. So you're not going to see a mini Manhattan skyline like you are in Tampa Bay. They're putting like 400 units in single buildings there because they can just keep going. Same way with these like towers in the sky of Miami. So all that to say, I think they do it in a balanced, controlled manner. I know it's a niche product. Economics-wise, it's tricky unless money is not an issue because of fees and that kind of thing. But if you're looking for that kind of turnkey lifestyle, very least, it doesn't hurt the value of the town. Okay, my sixth and final point for this video before we digress is new construction density. So it's interesting because if you look at how many new home communities are in the state of Florida right now and where they're based, it's about 2,500, it says, is actively building right now technically. Well, only 183 are in the Sarasota, Florida surrounding metro that we're describing here, which is like 7%. You could say, okay, well, how is that dense? It's how they're consolidated that makes it appealing. Because if you go to like an Orlando, is a great example, maybe a Jacksonville, even Tampa, they could have way more technically on paper. But when you get there, it looks like you call your shots online. You get there, it's just like random abyss. Like, no, a lot of them don't make sense to each other. And then you're like, okay, do I go north of the town, south of the town? It's very hard to make sense of it, which is what we try to do here on video. But Sarasota is not like that at all. There's like 2-3 total districts technically that it's going to feel like when you get here. Lakewood Ranch is the big monster right now, and that's the #1 multi-generational community like 6 years in a row in the state of Florida. Welland Park we've gone deep in, but then you could say the other places, Central Sarasota, Northern Venice, the coastal part of Nokomis down to Englewood, they're not necessarily random because one, they're grouping them very close to each other, but two, they are totally going to be transformed into districts. Like the Sky Ranch, Grand Park, Artistry area of Central Sarasota, below Lakewood Ranch, above Venice, I know we're getting into the weeds here. That area, you're going to have 3H Ranch and High Hat Ranch behind it, the area that sits adjacent to it or in front of it, depending on which community it is. And that's all going to form into commercial districts. Like the stuff on paper there, it's going to become like Waterside. It's going to become like Welland Park. And they're going to do what they did with like the West Villages. They're going to grab the neighborhoods that were already kind of around it, and everyone's going to get to enjoy those benefits to it. It's similar with North Naples. You see the hospitals going in, the commercial districts, the build-to-rent around it. They're building little mini towns. It's insane for the size of the history of this kind of beach town, the scale of the new construction, which makes it like a real unicorn in this kind of space, especially if you're relocating and logistics. It's all really pleasant. Second, on the size point, like this is one of the rare areas where it's very narrow, basically, like as you go here. So it's incredibly hard to get 35 plus minutes one way to anything, north, west, or south, which makes it where you could choose where you'd like to live, ideally, without being kind of tugged at home criteria. If criteria does push you in a different direction because of some sort of affordability or size reason or lifestyle reason, then you don't feel like you can't enjoy the other areas, you know? And I think all of that makes a lot of sense. And then lastly, a weird abundance of categorical-based living. You know, if you want affordability, you could go to Parrish, and Parrish now makes sense in context because you had Lakewood Ranch as a predecessor to it. You could go in Englewood versus Venice. You could go in Northport versus Venice. They all have a sister community that's done something really well that lets you say, okay, I get why this is cheaper than this because it's 7 miles from what everybody else deems important. If you want active adult living, there's a bunch of new construction. Del Webb, which is Pulte brand living. There are Brightmoor by Madame's doing that. Cresswin, which is Coulter, so you got variety there. You know, family-centric stuff's coming way more into prominence than it's been in the past. Taylor Morrison's brand that does more family-centric stuff, like Cassia at Sky Ranch. You have Park East. You have some really interesting kind of like semi-luxury options. So if you have like $850K to $1.5 million, whether you have a family or not. Yeah, Homes by Town's really interesting. Toll Brothers, Lower Lakewood Ranch, Palmera and Welland Park. You can go on and on. You know, if you're just a starter home, you're seeing more affordable stuff come into the area with median prices around like 380, 415, a lot of townhome stuff to satiate those needs as well. Investor-friendly stuff in the same vein. So I think, again, abundance never really hurts an incoming buyer, but providing more ways to satiate more people's needs really opens Sarasota up to more kinds of people, and I like all of that. All right, my friends, that is a wrap for today's version of the Florida Relocation Guide on YouTube. My name is Adam Hancock once again. I hope you have been enjoying the content. If you have, and you've not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. We're gonna go most Wednesdays and Sundays at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern for the balance of 2025. Subscribing is the best way to see what is coming next. Beyond that, I mentioned, of course, I own a full-scale residential real estate team. So if you like this kind of content, our team is very much on the back of this. We take analytics very serious. We take your finances very serious. And we're not mutually exclusive to it, but we do heavily play in relocating buyers from out of state, out of country. And also on the back of that, new construction happens a lot because of the dynamics of relocation to this particular town. But whether that's resale, you're selling, you're an investor, we're in the entire space. If you like how we're speaking here, then I think your experience with us in person will be very, very similar. And if you give us a call, I think you'll see that as well. So please consider reaching out. All our stuff is everywhere. So whatever you prefer there. And then lastly, we have two things that could be interesting for you. One are free guides on my website. Sarasota, Bradenton, Lakewood Ranch. I'm going to get more up there when I have some time. But these are high-level macro giveaway high-level macro things, best restaurants, new construction developments, places to eat, things to do. It's kind of like a local's favorite guide, and it's a real consumable way to do it. It's a flip book. You can download a PDF as well. And then lastly, one of the best things you could probably do on the back of these videos is the real-time newsletter. So once every 30 days, I send just a single email. It's a manifesto. It's a book, but it's one time. There's no spam in between. And that allows me to do stuff that I can't do without a 30-day loop. So the video you're watching today, for instance, obviously timing matters. Like what I say today might not be exactly the same 6 months from now, but these are more evergreen than anything. The newsletter doesn't have to be. So if there's new construction incentives that are interesting now that aren't going to be for 40 days from now, anything I'm trying to figure out, anything, you know, one of the real interesting things is when buyers come here, we're basically dealing with people that might be ahead of your timeline, and they're watching the videos, they come down and they're in the same loop you are, and they're trying things and they're discovering things, and they're seeing that this community that when they get here is different than they thought 100% it was going to be from what they saw online. And we should kind of share those experiences and where we see people are leaning versus not. And I found that to be very, very rhythmic with what people end up doing. So it's kind of like what people did or are doing now will benefit what you haven't done and are going to do in the future. The newsletter is a great way to kind of see that, if that makes sense. But if you don't do any of that kind of stuff, I really appreciate you guys taking any time to consume my content and rambling manifesto here on YouTube, and we'll see you on the next one.